So we are here today to discuss about how we as ordinary consumers can choose to consume consciously through everyday products. Now, this is a topic that's on the minds of so many of us these days, specifically now that, healthy and conscious consumption has increased multifold. The thought around it, the focus on it has increased multifold, both for ourselves and for the environment, by putting a little extra thought into what we are buying and how we are buying and what we are consuming. Now, the question is that difficult or is that easy? The questions are, how can various brands and consumers work together to make this possible, to make this consumption, this conscious consumption possible? And what does it mean to have different ingredients in different products, right? For example, what does it mean to have palm oil in our products? What does it mean to have to move towards more sustainable palm oil? These are some of the many questions that we will be touching upon today in this discussion, in this webinar, which has been organized in partnership with RSPO, that is Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil. And to take the discussion forward and to give us their insights, I have four fabulous experts who have been working in the field of conscious consumption for several years now. Four people who have been working on this for several years now. So let me quickly introduce you to them and we'll get started. So as I introduce everyone, I'd request them to switch their videos on. First up, we have Kamal Prakash, a strong advocate for sustainable living. Kamal is RSPO India's representative, working towards making sustainable palm oil the norm. He believes that this will help contribute toward UN SDG 12, that is responsible consumption and production. As the Deputy Director for Marketing Transformation at RSPO and founder of a social enterprise called Human Circle, Kamal is constantly striving to drive accountability and inspire consumers to be agents of change. Thank you so much, Kamal, for joining us today.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. Good to be here.
Thank you. Next up, we have Sloka Panda. He is the National Coordinator of Youth for Sustainability and founder of Blue Yard, a life skills learning initiative for school students. Through various campaigns and initiatives, he mobilizes youth to inspire and start conversations around sustainable living, especially by educating consumers to consume only sustainably sourced palm oil. Punya, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here.
We also have Shivani Gupta. She is the Chief Marketing Officer of Conscious Food, a pioneer in producing Indian organic and natural foods. It promotes chemical-free, unrefined, unadulterated food that preserves the environment and also provides wholesome nutrition. Shivani, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here too.
And we also have with us Paula Kaspick. She is the Sustainable Materials and Procurement Manager at Natura & Co., a Brazilian beauty company that includes prominent brands like Avon, Natura & Co., The Body Shop, and Aesop, all of which focus on responsibly sourcing of sustainable raw materials like certified sustainable palm oil. Thank you so much, Paula.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here.
Awesome. So I'm so excited with this extremely fabulous panel and to see all the amazing work that you guys are doing. So just to set some rules for our attendees, we'll be talking a bit, we'll be answering some questions, and then we'll be taking your questions. So if you have any questions, please do put that in the Q&A box and we'll try and answer as many as possible. And while anyone is speaking, the rest of us will remain on mute. So that's just some of the rules and we'll just dive into it. Kamal, I actually wanted to start with you and get things started with you with the very clear question of how can ordinary consumers like us make a difference through our choice of products, right? Like we think about how does it matter? Like I am using this box of something, how does it matter? But how can ordinary consumers like us through day-to-day, everyday choices make a difference?
Thanks, Tanya. This is a very important question to understand at the beginning. And I will answer this by asking a very simple question to everyone listening to this webinar or who will see it later. Try going to your kitchen, open your refrigerator, or try going to your bathroom, or use a delivery or open a delivery app that you use on your phone to order food during the pandemic, since we have not been going outside. In all the four situations, you will see that as consumers, we have a spending power, we have a purchasing power, we spend our money to buy products and services that help us in any which way, whether it's edible or non-edible. Step two, once you do that, you start turning the behind of the package. So let's say you eat a chocolate, you turn it back and you go to the ingredient section. If you use a shampoo, you go behind and check the ingredients. In 50% of the products, or more than 50% actually, you will realize that there is an ingredient of palm oil in it that you don't understand because it has very many technical names. The most straightforward name is refined palm oil for edible purposes, which you will see in a packet of noodles, or you will see it in chips, and so on and so forth. In the non-edible side of things, let's say shampoo, conditioners, face wash, it's in another technical name, but it's a derivatives name for palm oil. So in short, what I'm trying to say is that every second product we consume, at least in India, more than 50% on a day-to-day basis have an ingredient of palm in it, whether it's an edible ingredient or it's a non-edible ingredient. The question that I asked myself when I started working with RSPO for this cause is my consumption on a day-to-day basis causing the extinction of animals somewhere? Is my consumption causing the burning down of forest or creating forest fire? Is my consumption causing human rights violations somewhere in the world, whether it's in India or outside India? And when I asked those questions, it was like an awakening. It was like my consumption can actually make a difference if I do it in a sustainable, responsible manner. And that's my journey with RSPO and the members of RSPO, in which it's a roadmap that you take on every day as a consumer or as a company, in which every day you make better decisions. So if today you're ordering from a restaurant, which you for sure know is not sustainable, you change your restaurant. If you're buying from a brand which you kind of know is not sustainable, you change your brand. And how do you know that? You start asking brands those questions. You ask your brands on social media, or you send them an email, or one way or another, whether the noodles, the chocolates, the chips, the shampoos that I buy, can you tell me if it is sustainable or not? Because I want to know whether my consumption is causing environmental and social damage somewhere. So that would be my suggestion to anyone who wants to become a conscious consumer. And I can cover more later on.
Great, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, just being conscious and asking questions and finding the right avenues to ask those questions. Of course, that requires personal level of research and personal level of understanding, but that's the step that we have to take. Punya, I'll come to you next. In line with what Kamal was saying, what kind of role do you think the youth plays, right? You have been working so closely, right, from school students to college students. What have you seen? What kind of role can the youth play in inspiring masses to make such sustainable choices? And what have you been seeing them doing already?
So, taking on from where Kamal left, I think. So basically, I believe there are three stages to a change to happen. Is my voice audible? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are three phases to change to happen. The first one is application of the issue or the subject or topic, which also means awareness. The second stage is asking the right questions, and that is often what due to the rote learning of our education system we miss out. And that perhaps is the most important step that follows awareness, that we start asking the right questions. And then third is we take that conscious step first and then ask others to take. So I completely work in an assembly line of these three elements or phases, where first I work with the youth to kind of create that awareness, ask the right questions, whether it's your brand or whether it's the other consumers, the companies, the corporates, and then also choose sustainable practices and ask others to choose. So that is where I completely work, and the clarion call for whatever we do with the youth is action before reaction, which has two meanings. The first one is that we need to act first and then react to situations. And on the other side, on the other hand, the meaning is that, if we do not act now, then we will start seeing the reactions. And in the current scenario, it's not we will start seeing, but we have started seeing the reactions. So that's why youth needs to come forward, because of the demography, the total number of youth we have in our country. So it's a youth-driven solution that I believe in, and I can talk more about what we are doing, and what all things we plan to do later on.
Perfect. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's really interesting to see how you have been talking to young people and how you've been able to change mindsets, right? Like somebody who talks to them, gives them the right information points, then they're able to take the action is also extremely important on the ground. Shivranjani, I'll come to you next. In one of your interviews, you had mentioned that most people generally look for brands rather than nutrition. And that's a common practice, I feel. We all know a few names, and that's what will catch our eyes, or that's what we'll go looking for because that's what we know of. That's the knowledge that we have of. So in that case, how can we ensure that they choose right and embrace sustainable products over those that can just have adverse effects on their health and the environment?
Right. That's a very relevant question. And I think that's true for all of us, right? When we are buying a piece of chocolate, like Kamal was talking about, we don't very often turn it around and check for the labels. So I think that's one step that all of us must make. Go to the pantry and see what it is that you're consuming, that you're feeding your family. Because small changes there will start making a big difference when everyone starts doing it. Also, I think you are working with large brands. A lot of them get sucked into the cycle of industrialization where you start wanting to smooth and then you start cutting corners because sustainability at this point is expensive to do for a brand. So, and the only way to make that sustainable and make that cheap is to have many other people do it. Small case in point, we've never done, Conscious Food has always done food products. And we haven't really looked at the supply chain or the pricing. We believed in supporting the farmers. So we've gone with whatever price they're offering us because we want to promote fair trade. So a few months ago, we decided to do a promotion where we said we'll sell bamboo toothbrushes. And over the last few months, we've seen a dip in price in bamboo toothbrushes as a promotion that we were giving to customers. Only reason being customers are suddenly asking for bamboo toothbrushes. So instead of one person or one brand that's demanding the high price, now you have an influx of people, which means there's price competitiveness. So more people are being able to buy that bamboo toothbrush and opt for a more sustainable life choice. At the same time, the government starts paying attention. So you start having some influx of funds, which actually allows brands to actually carry that through as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for touching on that. I actually wanted to ask about the costs as well, because they become the first point of course, the hindrance or the thing that motivates you to move forward. With that, Paula, I'll actually come to the technicalities of how to go about these ingredients and all also. But I wanted to begin by asking you about, so big brands, as Shivranjani touched upon, how when many people start doing it, the cost comes down or helps to come down at least. How do you think big brands contribute to setting a positive consumption trend? So like one example that Shivranjani gave, what are some other examples like that, to start setting a positive consumption trend and to start a conversation around conscious consumptions? Because I feel unless the bigger brands don't start doing it, it still remains a niche topic or a niche subject to talk about.
So yeah, thank you for this question. Actually, it's a really, really important one. And in my view, there are two actually most important steps that encourage conscious consumption that any brand can do, right? So first of all, is to set a good strategy and objectives that really clearly show the level of ambition that the brand has. And the second one would be to communicate the strategy and progress with different stakeholders, but obviously starting with consumers. And I will use the Body Shop example to explain how this could look like. So the Body Shop is now a part of Natura & Co group. And this group actually includes 3 other brands as well. So Avon, Natura and Aesop. And 1 year ago, this group has announced commitment to life strategy that's based around 3 pillars. So addressing climate crisis and protecting Amazon, defending human rights, and embracing circularity and regeneration. So you can see this is a pretty comprehensive scope. And under each of the pillars, we have actually specifically defined measurable targets that we want to achieve. And one of them is to use 100% certified and palm oil by 2025. So once the strategy is in place, then the brand should focus obviously on delivery, but also on a clear communication. And again, Natura & Co, just an example, is a big user of palm oil. It's actually not a big user of palm oil, and TBS, so the shop is actually even smaller user. However, we have a huge reach. So we reach around 200,000 million people, consumers, consultants, and employees across the globe. So that's a huge number. So we also have this huge opportunity to educate them on various sustainability topics. So just to give you one example how we are doing that. So we run regular sessions on sustainability topics for the Body Shop consultants, so they can actually pass this knowledge and answer questions that consumers can ask them directly in stores, for example, right? Also those ones on palm oil. So there's this aspect of direct communication, but what else company can do? So definitely there are different channels like web pages, also webinars like this one to be run. And actually very recently, we've run 2-hour live online event on the anniversary of Commitment to Life, where various people from across the business were talking about the progress with the delivery, but also they shared the challenges we are experiencing at the same time. So, and this transparency and honesty, I think, is very important that brand shares with the consumers. So just to summarize, I think the most important steps for a brand is just to have a really, really strong strategy in place, and then deliver it, that's for sure, but also communicate properly and transparently across all the stakeholders.
Great, makes sense. Thank you so much for taking a specific brand, because it really gives us an idea about idea and understanding of what to look out for, what's happening, what kind of conversations are happening in the larger market. With that, I actually wanted to introduce our attendees and also the panelists about the Know Your Palm campaign that the Better India is doing with RSPO. So I would like to take this opportunity to tell our audience about that. So if for all of us, when we take a closer look into a lot of products that we consume, right, we'd see that 50% of our products, like be it from ice cream to all the other products that even Kamal was naming, you will find that they are all made using palm oil. It being the most versatile and popular edible oil in the market, it is quite popular, and still there are a lot of questions lingering around it, around how is it a good idea or not for the environment? But the answer always is that it is a good idea when it is sustainably sourced. And that is why Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil, that is RSPO, started in 2004 and has dedicated itself to promote sustainable production of palm oil all across the globe. Now, with Know Your Palm, the Better India is doing this series as a collaborative effort with RSPO to help India and to help consumers, businesses, and other stakeholders make these responsible and sustainable and conscious choices and be more aware of that. So I'll try and add a link in the chat box, and all our audience members could go to that and find more information about this campaign later as well. We'll move on, and Kamal, I'll bring you in again to ask about, how will embracing ethical measures like using sustainably sourced palm oil have, help larger companies and stakeholders who already have a sizable consumer base? They already have the base, they have already started the work, but if they now switch, if they now make that switch and embrace these ethical measures and start using these sustainably sourced raw materials, how would it still help them, even though they might be in their journeys already?
Thanks. I think that's a very important question, and to make it easy for our audience to understand, I'll use real examples. And since Paula mentioned about the Body Shop, and that's very popular in India in many sections of our society, I use it myself. If I look at why should I use Body Shop compared to the competitors of Body Shop, right, like other cosmetics and personal care brands that I have no knowledge whether they use sustainable or not sustainable palm oil, I can easily Google it, right? Like I can Google which companies transparently display on their website and their social media or wherever else about whether they source sustainably or not. So how can they play a role is because I think the question to ask, if I was a company or a competitor of the Body Shop in India, I would be asking, Do I want to continue being a market leader, or do I want to be a market leader in the next 10, 20, or 30 years? And then I would look at my target demographic and say, who are my prime customers in the next 2-3 decades? Because I need to think long term as a large company, right? As a multinational or as a large Indian company. And the answer to that question is what Punya already mentioned. The youth who are born in the 90s, born in the 2000s, are going to be your prime customers in the next coming decades. And the youth of this generation, the millennials, are already demanding that the brands are responsible, they are sourcing sustainably. We already had a whole Greta movement for so many years now. And Greta is just a symbol, but there are so many activists, so many youth who are aware, who ask the right questions. So if I want to be a market leader in 2020, 2030, 2040, I don't see this as an option if I'm a large company. I will not be relevant in the market, because sooner or later, this mindset, this behavior shift is already happening. Let's say that's 10% of the consumers. In the next 10 years, that's going to be 30-40%, right? So for me to stay relevant and have a significant market share as a company, I need to keep in mind what my consumers now and in the future are going to demand from me. And if that demand is for sustainable products, and if that demand is I should have a sustainable sourcing policy transparently put up on my website for everyone to see. If I don't do those things, I'm going to lag behind. I will be a dinosaur in 5-10 years from now. And we know the dinosaurs were extinct for different reasons, but large companies have also become dinosaurs who are not able to adapt to the changing realities in the external environment. So I think the call to action that RSPO has had for many years, we have more than 5,000 members, almost 3,500 companies out of the 5,000 members are for-profit organizations. The reason 3,500 companies are members of RSPO is because they see value. In fact, from equity terms, RSPO members outperform the non-member companies by 24.7% on equities over a period of 7 years, a study which was done by Climate Advisor. So in terms of the business case, long term, RSPO member companies have outperformed the non-member companies, because if you do sustainable sourcing, you communicate about it, there will be economies of scale, and you will make more and profits over a long term. So it's not a short-term game. The initial cost might be there, but you need to look at 5 years and 10 years from now what your consumers are going to demand from you.
Great, thank you so much. That's a very interesting point on how, yes, we have all started, the young audience, the young consumers have already started looking for these kinds of things in the market, and the brands, of course, have to wake up to what they are seeing everywhere, be it social media or even in different discussions like these. Punya, would you like to add on to that? Say millennials today, they have unique consumption trends that focus on ethical consumption more than conspicuous ones. So in what way do you think then, now that the demand is already coming in what way can companies and establishments tap into that potential now?
I think first I want to give a certain fact, and this fact comes from a company whose annual asset management numbers are greater than, much greater than the population of the entire world. And I'm speaking of BlackRock, which says that by 2025, 75 to 80% of the youth are going to work, buy, consume, and invest in companies or corporates or brands which are ethical, which believe in ethical sourcing, believe in sustainable development goals, climate action, and responsible consumption. And I think we all, the youth wing that I represent, definitely are on that train of thought. And I also saw a question in the questionnaire that how to ensure that good products and sustainable products are also relatively same price. And yes, it's the same, the economies of scale that we have to always take care of. And my personal thought about this is, yes, the youth is going to be the next set of major consumers in next 5 to 10 years. So if we start asking the right questions now, we'll definitely try to take leverage of the economies of scales, and everything will fall into place. But another point that I wanted to make is that to achieve the sustainable development goals, or to be environment friendly, we do not have to see it as a parallel. We have to intersect it. And I come from the school of thought of social entrepreneurship and social business, and I follow such entrepreneurs like as my idols, Muhammad Yunus being one of them. And I think with profit and people, now planet has to intersect. The third element should be planet, and everything has to be reimagined through the lenses of sustainability. Coming example, if the banks are giving loans, they have to check the sustainability factor, if that project is sustainable or not, environment friendly or not, and then maybe start giving better interest rates to those people. If I'm trying to buy a vehicle, if I make a choice between a motor vehicle that uses fossil fuels, that or an e-vehicle, so if I'm buying an e-vehicle, I should be given better interest rates for the loan that I'm making. Similarly with the consumption of the products also. So once we start making shifting our consumption, the brands will start reacting to it, because that is what the economic principles will force them to do. All the economic jargons that we use, crowding in effect, the median voter theorem, all of those that we have read in our textbook will actually become a practical thing. And that is how the change will happen slowly. And to reiterate, yes, youth needs to lead this, because in next 5-6 years we won't be youth. I'm 23 currently. In next 5 years, by the textbook definition of youth, I won't be a youth in India. I would have crossed the age of 28, and that's when I will be making my decisions. Shifting to the next generation, and if I am responsible, then my posterity is safe. So our ancestors have left this kind of chaotic situation to us right now. So if we take those responsible steps now, our posterity is safe. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Punya, for that. So a lot of work for young people also to do. Paula, I'd like to bring you in, and this is one question that I also had, and some people in the audience are also asking that on. Could you elaborate on when it comes to reading ingredients, right? What are some of the things we should keep in mind? Now I know it's different for different products, and there are so many different ingredients, and of course it can't be one general answer for everything in such a short interview. But if you had to give like some umbrella thoughts for us to keep in mind when we are going through the ingredient list of different products.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a really good question. And actually, I would say that you may assume that in any cosmetic products, there's most probably a palm oil in some form or shape, because palm oil is an excellent raw starting ingredient, and you actually can modify it in so many different ways that is really applicable in cosmetics, for example, right? So that's the business that Natura and Co is in. But definitely it's quite popular in food, where you can read specifically palm oil, so that's an easy one, right? In cosmetic ingredients, you would see it under a name of glycerin, under a name of cocamidopropyl betaine, and a couple of others. So it is confusing for suppliers, right? So I think consumers should make a simple assumption that if a brand has a range of cosmetic products, or a food company has a range of food products, there will be palm oil in those ranges, right? And there's nothing to, I would say, be fearful about, right? Is basically, I don't think it's the right choice to eliminate the palm oil. I think the right choice is actually understand how the brand is approaching sourcing of this material. And as I said, check if they have a strategy in place, what they're doing, if they're RSPO member, and then they can feel pretty confident that selecting this specific brand, even though there's palm oil in it, they are doing the right thing.
Great, makes sense. Shivranjani, if you could help me with add on to that, so we are talking about looking at ingredients, and we know for a fact that it's not always easy, like looking at ingredients, okay, but not all brands, not all packaging makes it very easy to look at ingredients and understand things, or even just look at the whole ingredient list is not always very easy for many people with many brands. So if you could tell us or just shed some light on what's your suggestion on how brands can make it easier for people with with maybe say for example packaging.
Now
is
there
that
are different. Sorry, go ahead, Paula.
No. I thought go ahead first. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
See, now the government has set some mandates in place some certificates and some logos that do simplify the process a little bit. Be it if the plastic you're using in packaging is recyclable, there are very clear logos that are certifiable that you can put on the front of the pack or the back of the pack, where the customer really doesn't have to think too much. They can look at it, it will say recyclable, it's very straightforward. Those are the simple solutions. You know, in terms of food, the best solution is to look at the back of the pack and to just at least glance through the label. And a simple rule of thumb is if you can pronounce the word and you can read the word, it's probably a natural raw ingredient, you know, something which has AEB or INS and 265 are things you probably want to avoid putting into your body because who knows what that means. But if it's something that says healthy and, you know, spice 1, 2, 3, which you've heard of and which you use in the kitchen, it's probably a safe bet to do it.
Okay, makes sense. We will be soon going on to some audience questions also. So people who are adding some questions, we will be checking some soon. I just wanted to go around the table once and get your views from everyone. So of course, like one of my questions was if you guys think this conversation, this whole thought and focus around ethical and organic and natural consumption is still niche or is it becoming mainstream? But I think that's answered. And I think we are all seeing that also in our lives. Sometimes I worry that it's just like just one of the bubbles that we are in and we see, oh wow, everyone in my circle is so conscious. But I feel after speaking to you guys that people are looking at consciously consuming more, and that's why brands have also started listening to that and making some changes. And as that happens more and more, we'll get, of course, more people to join in the movement also. But if you guys could give me any last thoughts you have on this subject and on anything, right, from what people should keep in mind to what would your message be to someone who has so far been living, say, for example, a not so sustainable lifestyle, right? Just because of the amount of information that was available to us. And we are just now waking up to so many new things. So what would your message be to them who are just starting now towards a more conscious and sustainable lifestyle? Kamal, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. I will suggest what I did myself. Take a pledge to be a conscious, responsible consumer. That's number one, bottom line. It's the part of my life to be a responsible consumer. That means every shopping decision and consumption decision I make, I've already taken a pledge. Now, next is to implement the pledge. How do I do that? I think you already mentioned there is a microsite that the Better India has created for the Know Your Palm campaign. Go to the Know Your Palm website, knowyourpalm.thebetterindia.com, take a pledge there and ask the brands that you use. So have a look in your house and see, let's say identify 10 brands that you use. If those 10 brands have an ingredient of palm, please ask those companies if that is sustainable or not. I think we have to get into the habit of doing these things. And also, interestingly, I want to mention that 2 years back, the WWF India office had done a consumer survey in which they asked consumers, if you knew about the negative impact of your consumption of products that have unsustainable palm oil, would you be willing to pay more? And that pay more could be as little as 10 paisa, which does not exist, could be 1 rupee, which is very, very small. And half the consumers said, had I known about the negative impact of my unsustainable consumption, I would be asking my brands these questions and would be willing to pay more as well, at least in urban India where the education levels is relatively high. So not to say urban or rural, as long as consumers are aware that their consumption is having a negative impact, consumers in India are on the rise who are willing to pay more to be a responsible consumer. And that little at a 10 rupee packet of noodles, we are talking about paisas here, like 2 paisa, 3 paisa, 4 paisa. You'd imagine you cannot pay 10 rupees, 2 paisa for a sustainable product. So either you're paying 9 rupees, 10 rupees, or 11 rupees. But the least we can do as consumers is to ask the brands that I consume, saying, this is a 10 rupee product. If you were to assure to me that this is sustainable, I'm willing to give you more. But please tell me if it is sustainable or not, because the margin is very, very small as per this survey. We're talking about few paisas here that eventually consumers have to pay. So it's not the money. And that's the myth that I really want to break. Sustainable products are not as expensive that they are perceived to be. We are talking about few paisa and few rupee here and there. So please start asking the brands those questions. And then the more the demand rises for sustainable products, the cost will come down even further.
Thank you so much. Paula, would you like to go next?
Yeah, well, it's difficult to add anything after what Kamal said. Actually, yeah, I think, it's important for consumers to be vocal, to say what they think, to clearly ask for sustainable products, because this is well, it's no longer, I would say, a luxury, right? It's something that should every brand with a purpose should basically offer, right? And I think that, well, it's I don't think that there is now any other choice to go different way, right? I think that, responsible and ethical sourcing is just the only way to go. With what happened with COVID, is how our future looks like, right? So I think that consumers need to be really, really clear and really, really loud about it, and ask their brands through many different channels, directly and sending emails. And yeah, I think that's something that will definitely have an impact. And I think that brands already taking it on board, right? I can see that a lot is changing. I mean, the Body Shop is not a new for us. I mean, we've made a decision on our mission, ethical mission.
Sorry, Paula, I think Paula, can you hear us? Okay, while Paula tries to
from a really small niche brand just in UK, we're now big international brand, and I don't think it's because our products are that only our products, but also the ethical purpose behind it, right? So yeah, so that's important.
Sure, thank you, Paula. We lost you in between, but I think your voice came back soon, so the message was clear. And that's great to hear, actually, your points. Thank you so much. Punya, would you like to add to that?
Yes, definitely. I couldn't agree anymore to Paula, rightly said. I'll just say three things, two to the attendees and the youth, and one for all the panelists, including the team of Better India. So first two things for the youth is, number one, please do not be lazy. Our parents did not have an option to check for all the things on internet, or information was not available seconds away or at their fingertips. We have that luxury of information, I would say. Although yes, there is very much possibility of false information or fake information, but then we are rational. We know the difference, and we can ask ourselves which one is actually making sense and which is not. So please do not be lazy, because whatever we are doing today has an impact 10 years later on, or even 100 years later on. So we don't realize that, so we have to realize. Second thing is actually, uh, try to bring the change from your end first, and be the change that you want to see. That has been a clarion call since the beginning, when we started Youth for Sustainability and Blue Year and everything. So reverse engineer the learning that you have had, not from textbook to practice, but from empirical practice, or action to textbooks, because that is how it should be. Reverse engineer the way you have functioned till date. And of course, on behalf of this entire webinar that we are doing today, thanks to Better India, it's a request and offer to all the panelists, Kamal, Paula, and Shivaranjani, and of course Tanaya from Better India, that keep believing in youth. I have been doing environment impact consulting since last 2 years, after I left my job to completely focus on this. And impact branding, impact marketing, impact PR, and some ground level action can actually happen, where the business elements can be intersected with impact, and that has perhaps given a pretty good organic reach to the brands that you have worked with, RSPO being one of them. I worked with RSPO on that, and also working on the know Your Palm campaign. But other than that, also other brands that we have collaborated with, they're really happy with the way youth driven impact consulting has happened, and how we have given them the numbers that they need in terms of marketing. So looking forward to work with all in the panel also. So that would be all from my side, and thank you for having me. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Punya. Shivranjani, would you like to take the last words?
Sure, Tina, thanks. Um, so the last bit I'd add is, sometimes I think the social messaging around sustainability and going eco-friendly can be a little overwhelming for people, especially if you're in that bubble where all people are talking about is this is my carbon footprint and this is what you should do. So I think it's like Punya very correctly said, it's important not to be lazy and to take that first step. And I think it can also just happen if you just take that one step, right? So for a lot of us, it's easier to take one small step rather than make one big change in our lifestyle. And it could be as simple as just moving to a reusable water bottle instead of using a one-time use mineral water bottle. Bring the same bottle to your office every day and wash it and reuse it. If you think that fashion is the way to go, try to avoid fast fashion brands. Look for brands that are making products with cotton and linen rather than polyester. So do one thing, take one step that suits your lifestyle, and then build from there. That's the last thing I'd say.
Awesome. That's a great answer. Do one thing, take that one step, and then move forward from there. I have some interesting questions from the audience. We'll quickly do 10 minutes of questions, take in some from them. The first one, I think Paula or Kamal, either of you could take this. This is a question on what role would ESG reporting play in helping brands move towards sustainable palm oil?
I think I would request Paula to answer that as a company, how ESG reporting happens. So maybe Paula, you could take that at Natura for ESG reporting.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually not a reporting expert, but yeah, could you repeat the question because I haven't heard it properly? Sorry.
Yeah, the question, Paula, is what role would ESG reporting play in helping brands move towards sustainable palm oil?
Well, I think that reporting requirements are constantly growing, right? So I am responsible sourcing and sustainability strategies are now recognized as part of financial reporting as well, right? So I think it's already a part of the reporting framework for each company, and I think from next year it will become a full requirement to report on all three elements. So I think it's already there, right? So each company is actually sharing their sustainability progress as part of their financial reporting. If that was the question, because I'm not sure if what I answered it fully.
Yeah, I think I will add to that. Thanks, Paula, for starting with that answer. There are two things here, and I'll bring it back to India specific. So the Ministry of Finance has set up a sustainable finance working group, and some of our RSPO partners work on that, are a part of that working group. What's happening as we speak is that the government of India and many other governments have realized that to meet the Sustainable Development Goal targets of 2030 and the nationally determined contributions, sustainable finance has an important role to play, of which environmental and social governance, for the interest of audiences that don't know, ESG is environmental and social governance reporting. So it's now already becoming mainstream. The Reserve Bank of India, this working group of the Ministry of Finance, as well as the stock exchanges like the Bombay Stock Exchange, all of them are already working to ask the listed companies and even the other companies to report on environmental and social governance. So it's no longer a niche subject. It's already in the making. Very soon, we'll be hearing announcements from the government, from the Reserve Bank, or from the stock exchanges to say that this is not something optional for you. You have to report to us on these ESG criteria. So there is a clear benefit. The second thing, which is more of a business reason to do it, is that there are many financial institutions and banks, let's say HSBC, Rabobank, and many others, which have a criteria in that system, in a portfolio that says, if you meet these criteria on ESG, like let's say you have a sustainable sourcing policy, you're a member of RSPO, you're sourcing sustainable palm oil, if you tick all these boxes and you prove it to me, I will give you a better rate of interest. I will give you, reduce the fee on your loan. So those things are already happening. So it's only a matter of time. It's not whether or not, it's like, when is that happening and when is it becoming mainstream? So ESG is like already becoming a default for companies.
Thank you so much, Kamal. Very informative, and thank you for shedding the light on that. One more question we have, it's from an anonymous attendee. I think, Shivranjani, you could take this up on what sources to rely upon for understanding the nutritional value of products that we purchase. Are there any resources that you would like to mention, or are generally searching them on different platforms? Is that the way to go about?
That's one way to go about it, and basic information you can get over there. The safest way to go would be to rely on government released information. India and USA both have their own nutrition databases, which is usually very reliable, because sometimes with private databases, you may fall prey to, you don't know what commercial agreements they have with other vendors. So in our experience, it's been best to, unless you can test it yourself, as a consumer, the best thing to do is to rely on databases that come certified by the government.
Okay, thank you so much. One more question, Kamal, that keeps coming up, and I know we have answered this through various articles, and I'll try and lead people there as well. But if some people are asking on what's the difference between sustainable and unsustainable palm oil, and why is one considered good and bad?
Sure, we keep getting the same question, and I think I touched upon it at the beginning. Palm oil, which is produced in a way which is unsustainable and causes eventually or directly, indirectly, the extinction of species. So let's take few animals that we are familiar with: tigers, elephants, rhinos, orangutans. Many of them in Southeast Asia are on the verge of extinction. And the question is why? Because of the demand for palm oil, it increased so much. The growing countries were under tremendous pressure to produce more palm oil. In those days, there was no RSPO in the 90s, right? So everyone became desperate to grow more and more palm oil because the global demand was rising. Now, the difference between sustainable and unsustainable is that if it is RSPO certified, there is no chance that there can be deforestation since the establishment of the RSPO, which happened in 2004. That means that if you consume products that has RSPO certified sustainable palm oil, you can be rest assured that there is no deforestation, no exploitation. Otherwise, those companies cannot get certified in the first place. So the fact that they are certified means that there is no deforestation, no exploitation, no planting on peat, and all of those things are already taken care of. So that's the difference. So coming to the same conversation, right? If I use a toothpaste in the morning, the toothpaste has a small derivative of palm in it, and that palm was produced in a plantation somewhere else in the world. Let's say that somewhere else is Indonesia. And that was because of land conversion. Some primary forest was converted to agricultural land. So because of certification, the yield itself goes up of the same piece of land over a period of time. That means you can grow more with less. That's another part of sustainability, right? So if sustainable, that means in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, the same piece of land, because of good agriculture practices, starts producing more and more in the same piece of land. That means less pressure on the forest to be converted to agricultural land. So that's the value of calling something sustainable palm oil versus calling something unsustainable. Whereas in unsustainable, because there is lack of sustainable agriculture practices, because there is verification system as an incentive, the growers continue to grow it unsustainably, which means biodiversity loss, extinction of species, low yields. Low yields means you need more land to produce the same thing. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you so much. One question from Vinay is it mandatory in India for products to declare their, for producers to declare their practice of sourcing raw materials and ingredients? And further, is it possible for consumers to judge whether their practice is sustainable? So I think you guys had touched upon that we have to go on the website, on their websites and see, but if anyone could take up on what the rules are around that in India.
I could just start and maybe someone else could add to it.
Yeah.
FSSAI, which is the Food Authority of India, only a few years back said you cannot write vegetable oil in ingredient section. You have to write which vegetable oil, right? So if you remember 2-3 years back, if you were having a packet of chips or a packet of bhujia or snacks, you would see vegetable oil written on it. So FSSAI went ahead and said, you can't write vegetable oil. You have to be more transparent and write refined palm oil, cottonseed oil, sunflower oil. So that's one step. So it's moving in that direction, but there is no compulsion or a regulation to say whether it's sustainable or not sustainable. That has not become regulation, and that is the next level now. And if we as consumers, companies, and NGOs in India come together to say we need a regulation. So if you put yourself in the shoes of the government, a government of India or a state government, why should they come out with a regulation unless there is a demand for a regulation? So the ball is in our court to demand for these regulations if you want to be responsible consumers. Otherwise, no legislation happens out of the vacuum. There is consistent kind of consensus and demand, and then a legislation happens that gets discussed in Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, and then it becomes a law after that, right? So we all need to work together to make sure that we are demanding for such legislations, that it is compulsory for you to have a sustainable sourcing policy, and you have to make it transparent on your website.
Great. Thank you so much. Shivranjani, you wanted to add something to that?
Bang on answer.
Okay.
I think that's absolutely it. The other change FSSAI has also done is to ask companies to list their ingredients in descending order of weight, which will also give you a little bit of information about how healthy or unhealthy it is. If it's a product that is, a sauce, but the first ingredient is sugar, then you want to be careful of that. But for
Awesome,
sustainability, like Kamal said, there's really nothing right now which the government mandates from us.
Okay. Thank you so much, Vinay. I think that answers your question. I see a lot of questions that we have answered through the conversation. There's some around the cost and does it come down with demand? And it does. We did touch upon that. We also have people saying some great things about the work that's happening around them already in the chat section. Someone is asking about ingredient list. Sorry, I think that would become that would be a whole webinar in itself about the specific ingredients that we should keep in mind and we should go through, and what should we avoid and what should we not. Someone is saying that they would emphasize on the use of social media to ask these questions so that others are made aware and come on board. And that's a great point. Actually, that's one of the things that we are emphasizing through Know Your Palm campaign, also to use social media to tag your brands, to ask the relevant questions, and use the power of social media as much as you can to get in more people also and make others aware as well. So thank you so much for sharing that point. Hardik is saying that they also try and promote sustainability and zero waste in their school, and on their annual days are also almost zero waste. Hardik, that's great to hear, and thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's all the time that we have for most of the questions, and we have answered most as well. I'm seeing a few repeated questions. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today on this Friday evening, giving me your time and touching base on these extremely important topics, right? Extremely important subjects that we have to start conversations on. As consumers, we often wonder how far we would need to trace back the journey of the products to determine whether it's ethical or not, right? How do we truly know where our lotion, shampoos, fries, these things are coming from? And these conversations, these kinds of awareness bits, organizations like RSPO and several other stakeholders, like all of you on our panel, when you come together, you provide us a streamlined solution. And it is a reminder that each one of us is an important entity of change, and that our decisions, however small, however big, truly count, and they're never in isolation. So thank you so much for giving me your time today, and we'll see you soon with more such informative conversations around conscious consumption and sustainable living. I hope this was useful and could give you a few steps to take in. For me, the takeaways were definitely ask questions and take that first step and move forward from there. And of course, we will see more and more people joining you, and you'll see more and more people willing to help you with a lot of information. So yeah, ending this with that. Thank you, guys. We'll see you soon. Bye.